You can't freeze what isn't mine. The defendant didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The confidence in it carried. The courtroom microphones caught every syllable. Across the room, a few observers exchanged glances. The kind of glance that said, "He thinks this is already over." The judge looked up slowly from the file in front of him. "Double quotes, Mr. Victor Hawley," he said evenly. "You are advised to speak through counsel." Victor Hawley adjusted his cufflinks as if this were a board meeting instead of a sentencing hearing. "With respect, Your Honor," he said calmly, "I have already divested operational control from the entities referenced." The prosecutor didn't look surprised. She stepped forward. "Divested on paper." Hawley gave a faint smile. "Paper is what the law recognizes." The room shifted. Because that wasn't arrogance. That was strategy. The judge leaned back slightly. "For clarity," he said, "you are asserting that the companies under investigation are no longer connected to you, correct?" The prosecutor opened a thick folder. "Your Honor?" The defendant transferred controlling interest in 12 subsidiaries 72 hours before regulatory seizure. Hawley didn't blink. "Timing is not illegality." The prosecutor continued. "The recipients of those transfers are newly formed trusts, registered to addresses that share digital infrastructure with the defendant's private office." Hawley turned slightly toward her. "Shared infrastructure does not establish ownership. The judge's gaze sharpened. But it establishes proximity." Hale's posture remained straight. "For years," the prosecutor said, "the defendant has structured his operations to shield liability behind layers of shell corporations." "Protection," Hawley corrected softly. "Not shielding." "Protection?" the judge interjected. "Protection from what, Mr. Hawley?" Hale's answer came smoothly. "Market volatility, political overreach, regulatory misinterpretation." A faint murmur ran through the gallery. The prosecutor's voice cut through it. "Or accountability." Hawley exhaled slowly. "You are reframing compliance as conspiracy." The judge folded his hands. The evidence before this court includes coordinated asset movement, preemptive liquidation, and encrypted directives sent to senior executives. Hale's eyes narrowed slightly. "Strategic restructuring." The prosecutor stepped closer. "Strategic restructuring triggered immediately after learning subpoenas were forthcoming." Silence. The judge looked at Hawley carefully. "You were aware of impending investigation?" Hawley hesitated just long enough to matter. "I was aware of rumors." The prosecutor lifted a printed transcript. "An internal message from you states, and I quote, 'Move everything before they can touch it.'" The air tightened. Hawley shifted in his seat. "That message referred to public relations strategy. The prosecutor didn't blink. "It was sent to your chief financial officer." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Hawley, this court is not concerned with public relations." He paused. "It is concerned with obstruction through asset manipulation." Hale's composure held. "Your Honor, freezing assets without definitive ownership findings would destabilize thousands of employees and investors." The judge's tone cooled. "So your defense is economic collateral?" "My defense," Hawley replied, "is structural legality." The prosecutor placed another document on the evidence table. "Your Honor, overnight forensic tracing confirmed that despite public divestment, signature authority on primary accounts remains routed through the defendant's biometric authentication." That sentence landed differently. Because it wasn't theoretical. It was technical. Hale's attorney stood. Your Honor, biometric routing is a legacy configuration. The judge didn't look away from Holly. Is it still active? The defense hesitated. Technically, yes or no. Yes. A faint ripple passed through the courtroom. The judge's voice lowered. So the assets are functionally under your control? Hale's jaw tightened. Temporarily. The prosecutor seized it. Asterisk. Temporarily until CJA, correct? Holly didn't answer. The silence spoke. The judge picked up a separate document. This court has authority under statute to issue emergency financial restraint where there is credible risk of asset dissipation. Holly leaned forward. Risk does not equal proof. The judge's eyes hardened. Pattern equals risk. The word again, pattern. The prosecutor continued. Over the past 18 months, the defendant transferred over $80 million through layered trusts within 48 hours of regulatory inquiry. Holla gave a thin smile. Efficient. Management. Asterisk. The judge's tone sharpened. Or anticipatory evasion. Hale's breathing deepened slightly. You are criminalizing preparation. The judge leaned forward fully now. I am preventing disappearance. Silence. The kind that presses against your ribs. The prosecutor stepped toward the bench. Your Honor, if this court does not act immediately, the remaining liquid assets can be restructured beyond retrievable jurisdiction. Hale's attorney interjected. That is speculative. The prosecutor turned. It is mathematically demonstrable. The judge looked directly at Holy. Asterisk. You told this court the assets were no longer yours. Yes, and yet you retain operational access. Temporarily. The judge's voice dropped lower. Temporarily is long enough. The gallery shifted. Hale's confidence flickered, not gone, but thinner. Freezing all corporate accounts, he said carefully, would be unprecedented. The judge didn't hesitate. So was the scale of your restructuring? The prosecutor added quietly, Your Honor, we request immediate full asset freeze across all primary and affiliated accounts. Pending final forfeiture hearing. The defense stood quickly. That would cripple lawful operations. Asterisk. The judge turned slowly toward the attorney. If operations are lawful, they will survive review. He looked back at Holly. If they are not, they will not survive continuation. Holly finally showed visible strain. You're making a spectacle. The judge's response was ice. No. He lifted the formal order from the clerk's desk. I am making a barrier. The room seemed to shrink. Hale's voice lowered. You don't have enough to justify total freeze. The judge looked directly at him. I have enough to justify preservation. He raised the document slightly. Asterisk. This court finds credible evidence of intentional asset migration to avoid enforcement. Hale's hands gripped the edge of the defense table. The judge continued. Effective immediately. All accounts, trusts, subsidiaries, and affiliated financial instruments tied to Victor Holly are frozen pending full forensic audit. The air left the room. Audible gasps. One of Hale's corporate advisors in the gallery stood abruptly before sitting back down. Holly stared forward, expression locked, but his breathing betrayed him. The judge wasn't finished. Further, he said, any attempt to reroute, conceal, or reactivate frozen assets will constitute additional criminal contempt. Holly finally spoke. You can't freeze what you can't trace. Asterisk. The judge met his gaze. We already have. The gavel rose slowly. This order stands effective immediately. The strike echoed sharply. Clerk, notify all relevant financial institutions. The clerk nodded, already typing. Hale's attorney leaned in urgently. We can appeal. Hallett didn't answer. Because something had shifted. For years, investigations had chased him. For years. Regulators lagged behind his restructuring. But today, the law moved first. And this time, everything stopped moving. The bailiff stepped slightly. Closer, not to restrain, just to signal finality. Hale looked up at the bench. You've frozen? Liquidity, he said quietly. The judge's expression did not change. No, he replied. I've frozen leverage. The silence that followed felt permanent, and for the first time in this courtroom, Victor Hale looked like a man who realized speed would not save him. The clerk's keyboard didn't stop moving. Each keystroke felt like another lock clicking. Into place. Victor Hale remained seated, but his stillness had changed. It was no longer composed. It was calculated. He leaned toward his attorney. Call Zurich, he whispered. The bailiff heard it. Mr. Hawley, the judge said without raising his voice, you will not issue directives from this courtroom. Hale straightened slowly. I was asking for clarification. The judge didn't blink. You were asking for execution. A faint ripple of tension moved through the gallery. The prosecutor stepped forward. Your Honor, confirmation from the first 3 financial institutions has already been received. The clerk nodded. Accounts secured. The words echoed harder than the gavel had. Hale's jaw tightened. Those are domestic accounts, he said evenly. You're overstating containment. The prosecutor didn't hesitate. International notices were transmitted simultaneously. Holly turned slightly toward her. Jurisdictional compliance varies. The judge folded his hands. Not when coordinated through mutual enforcement treaties. A silence followed that felt surgical. Hale's attorney tried again. Your Honor. Freezing operating capital will trigger contract defaults, employee panic, and shareholder litigation. The judge responded calmly. Consequences of structure are not this court's burden. Hall finally allowed a trace of frustration into his voice. You're destabilizing markets. The judge looked directly at him. Double quotes, no. I am stabilizing evidence. Another clerk approached the bench and handed up a printed confirmation slip. The judge read it briefly. Primary holding account, restricted. Another slip followed. Secondary trust cluster, locked. The prosecutor spoke quietly. Your Honor, biometric override has been disabled. That one hit visibly. Hale blinked once. You can't deactivate executive access without full adjudication. The prosecutor replied evenly. Under emergency preservation statute, we can. The judge confirmed with a nod. Executive privileges tied to frozen assets are suspended pending review. Hawley leaned back in his chair. For years, access had been his power.finger to scanner.account. Unlocked movement, authorized now, -nothing. The defense attorney whispered. Urgently, we file an immediate motion to stay. The judge answered before papers were even lifted. Denied. On what grounds? Likelihood of continued dissipation. Hale's composure cracked slightly. You have no proof I would move anything further. The prosecutor stepped forward again. Your Honor, we've just received notification from an offshore compliance partner. The room stilled. She glanced at the tablet. An automated liquidation attempt was triggered 32 minutes ago. Every head turned toward Holly. His attorney froze. "That's impossible," Holly said. The prosecutor looked directly at him. "It was programmed before today's hearing." Silence. The judge's voice lowered. "A failsafe." Holly didn't respond. The prosecutor continued. *A. Timed instruction to transfer residual liquidity to a non-disclosed custodial structure. The judge leaned forward. "Was it executed?" "Blocked upon Freeze confirmation." The air in the room shifted completely. This was no longer theoretical. This was movement caught mid-flight. Hale's breathing grew heavier, though he tried to control it. "You're criminalizing contingency planning," he said tightly. The judge's response was immediate. "You're confirming it?" The gallery murmured again. The judge raised a hand. "Order." The room quieted. "Double quotes, Mr. Halle," the judge said evenly. "You told this court the assets were no longer yours." Holly stared forward. "Yet a liquidation instruction was tied to your personal authorization key." The defense tried to intervene. "Your Honor, sit." The attorney sat. The judge continued. "This court does not punish wealth." He paused. "It punishes manipulation of process." The prosecutor added quietly, "Your Honor, this supports full forensic expansion." Halle snapped his head toward her. "Expansion into what?" The judge answered. "Every layer." That landed heavier than anything yet. Because expansion meant exposure. The prosecutor pressed further. "We request appointment of an independent financial monitor with full access to internal communications and escrow mechanisms." Holly shook his head slowly. "You're dismantling infrastructure." The judge's tone hardened. "You built infrastructure designed to evade oversight." Holly leaned forward despite himself. "Prove intent." The judge's eyes locked onto his. "You just did." Silence. Another clerk approached. "Your Honor, confirmation from 2 international clearinghouses. Compliance complete." The judge nodded. "Enter into record." Hale's hands were no longer resting calmly. They were gripping the edge of the table again. "This won't hold," he said quietly. The judge replied just as quietly. "It already is." The prosecutor stepped forward once more. "Your Honor, given the automated liquidation attempt, we move to amend conditions to include restricted communications pending audit." Hale's attorney stood sharply. "That is excessive." The judge considered briefly. "Restricted communications limited to counsel only." The gavel tapped once, not full strike, but warning. "Effective immediately." Cole exhaled sharply. "You're isolating me." The judge met his gaze. "I'm preventing coordination." The difference was surgical. The gallery felt it. The clerk looked up again. "Your Honor, final confirmation from National Banking Consortium. Freeze protocol fully active." There it was, complete. No leaks, no movement, no rerouting. Holly sat back slowly. For years, investigations had chased numbers that shifted faster than paperwork today. The numbers stopped moving. The judge folded the order and placed it firmly on the bench. "Victor Holly," he said calmly, "your strategy relied on speed and complexity." A pause. "This court has neutralized both." Holly looked up. Not defiant now. Calculating something else. "Appeals move faster than you think," he said quietly. The judge's expression remained steady. "And freezes move faster than appeals." Silence. The prosecutor gathered her materials. Your Honor, we request scheduling for full forfeiture hearing. The judge nodded. Set for expedited review. Asterisk, the gavel rose. Court stands adjourned. The strike echoed, but unlike previous hearings, there was no sense of unfinished business. As officers stepped closer, not to cuff, but to escort Holly, remained seated for one extra second, as if waiting for something. A call, a message, a confirmation. Nothing came, because everything was frozen, and for the first time in years, Victor Hale's empire wasn't shifting in the shadows. It was locked in plain sight. Asterisk. Victor Holly did not stand when the judge rose. He remained seated, staring at nothing in particular, as if waiting for the world to correct itself. It didn't. The bailiff stepped closer. Mr. Holly. That was enough. He stood. But he didn't look defeated. He looked like a man. Recalculating. The gallery began to empty in controlled murmurs, but before Holly could be escorted out, the prosecutor spoke again. Your Honor, one final matter before adjournment is finalized. The judge paused mid-step, stated. The prosecutor remained standing. Within the past 10 minutes, an executive from Holly Strategic Holdings has submitted a voluntary affidavit. Asterisk. Holly stopped moving. Just slightly. His attorney turned sharply. Who? The prosecutor didn't. Look at them. Chief Compliance Officer, Adrian Mercer. The name landed. Because Mercer wasn't a junior employee, he was inner circle. Hale's voice dropped. What affidavit? The prosecutor continued calmly. In the affidavit, Mr. Mercer confirms that asset transfers over the past 18 months were structured, specifically to remain technically compliant while intentionally obstructing regulatory recovery. The air thinned. The judge slowly returned to his seat. Asterisk. Does the affidavit address yesterday's liquidation trigger? Yes, Your Honor. Hale's breathing deepened. The prosecutor read directly from the document. Quote, the timed liquidation protocol was authorized by Mr. Holly personally and programmed as a contingency in the event of judicial restraint. Eh? Faint, stunned reaction spread through the room. Hale's attorney spoke quickly. This is opportunistic cooperation. The prosecutor replied without hesitation. It is corroborated by internal system logs. The judge looked directly at Holly. You authorized a pre-programmed escape? Holly didn't answer, because denial would collapse under logs. The judge continued. Asterisk. You told this court the assets were no longer yours. Silence. The prosecutor added. Mr. Mercer has also agreed to testify at the forfeiture hearing regarding operational intent. Holly finally spoke. He's protecting himself. The judge's tone cooled further. Perhaps. A pause. Or perhaps he understands the difference between delay and defeat. Hale's composure thinned visibly now. You're rewarding betrayal. The judge's reply was precise. I am rewarding disclosure. The prosecutor stepped closer. Your Honor, based on this affidavit and the automated liquidation attempt, the state moves to convert the freeze into full temporary receivership pending forfeiture. Asterisk. The defense reacted immediately. That strips operational control entirely. The judge's gaze never left Harley. Operational control was already misused. Harley leaned forward. You're handing my company to outsiders. The judge responded evenly. No, I'm handing it to neutrality. The room felt heavier than before, because freeze meant pause. Receivership meant removal. The prosecutor clarified. An independent court-appointed monitor would assume authority to preserve employee payroll and contractual obligations while preventing concealment. The judge considered briefly, then nodded. Asterisk motion granted. The words were final. Effective immediately. Halle Strategic Holdings and all affiliated entities are placed under temporary receivership. Hell's shoulders lowered for the first time. Not dramatically, but undeniably. Because this was no longer about frozen Funi. It was about lost control. The judge continued. Mr. Hull, you structured complexity to outrun accountability. A pause. You designed timing to defeat enforcement. Another pause. Both have now failed. Halle stared at the bench. Asterisk, you think this ends me? The judge's voice was calm. I think this ends your leverage. Silence. The prosecutor added quietly, for clarity, Your Honor, the forfeiture hearing will determine permanent disposition. The judge nodded. It will. He leaned slightly forward one last time. Victor Holle, this court does not move against wealth. It moves against manipulation of process. Hale's voice dropped low. You froze everything. The judge corrected him. No? He lifted the signed order. I preserved everything. Asterisk, that distinction settled heavily in the room. Because preservation meant review, and review meant exposure. The judge raised the gavel. This matter proceeds to expedited forfeiture review. Court stands adjourned. The strike echoed. Long.clean.final.s. Officers stepped forward to escort Halle out. There were no whispered instructions, no signals, no hidden devices. His biometric access was disabled, his timed protocols blocked, his internal network under independent control. Asterisk, for years. Investigations chased him across layers of trusts and transfers. Today, the chase stopped. Because the money stopped at the doorway. Halle paused briefly. He looked back toward the bench. The judge was already reviewing new filings, not watching him, not reacting, because the spectacle had ended, and in its place, procedure, structure, audit. Clerks continued typing. Compliance notices continued transmitting. Asterisk, receivership confirmations continued arriving. Everything that once moved at his command now moved under court supervision, and, for the first time in a long time, Victor Hull simply stopped, frozen, expose, and awaiting judgment.